The founder of the science of mind was Ernest Holmes. And Ernest Holmes, as I said earlier, has a whole chapter 16, 21, in the textbook that is what the mystics taught. And in the very beginning, he says and he had a little cheeky sense of humor. Mystics aren't mysterious people, not oddballs, not, what's up with that person? But maybe, what's up with that person? We'll get to that. But a mystic is someone who has a deep inner sense of life, right? A deep inner sense of life, knowing and recognizing their unity with the whole, that connection with God. It's one who intuitively perceives truth, Ernest Holmes says. And he goes on to say, without mental process, that the mystic arrives at a spiritual realization. Well, Stephen Hawking had something to say about that, the physicist. He said, mysticism is for those who can't do math. But there was a retort to that. No, mystics are people who don't need to do math. Yeah, because they have a direct experience, right? Because they have a direct experience. So I say yes, and it's all of the above and more. I believe that we are all mystics, that we all have the capability to have mystical experience, to feel that connection, to be deeply rooted in life itself, to be informed by life itself. To me, a mystic is one who listens and knows and acts upon that knowledge. But I think a mystic can also be one who listens and then acts and then knows. Did you catch the switch in the words? Yeah. Sometimes we know and we act. We know that we know that we know that we know we know, and we act upon it. But other times there's a little doubt. There's a little worry and there's a little fear. But when we trust, when we have faith, we listen, right? And we act, even though we have some trepidation, and then we know, right? Prove it. Prove it to me now. That's what we do, yeah. Knowledge, that kind of knowledge, I love the idea that comes from Einstein, that it's that kind of knowledge that we seek, the knowledge that we know that we know that we know that we have proved it to ourselves. Nobody takes it away from us. It's ours. It's deep. It's rooted. Yeah. So many people we consider mystics have had instant insight, right? However, there's other people that we consider mystics who studied and had mystical experiences, had insights. Those insights can come from study. And I believe, as I started this month, I believe that it really has a lot to do with what our idea, our belief in God is. And we began this month with a meditation on that. What are our beliefs about God? What is it? Who is it? Where is it? And what's our relationship to it? Right? Because that matters. That makes a big difference in how our life unfolds. I believe that it's our recognition of this power and presence, our being able to touch it, to connect with it, in and all around us. And Jesus and Buddha taught the same thing. That there's a universal love and a compassion that comes from their teachings that is rooted, deeply rooted in that idea of unity. And saints and bodhisattvas, Martin Luther King Jr. and Gandhi, yeah, they had that belief. This week begins the 22nd annual season for nonviolence, which is the 64 days in between the anniversaries of the passing of both Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I know there are mystics here in this room this morning. There are pessimistics, and there are optimistics. I shall not ask you to raise your hand, but you know who you are. So in the teachings of Jesus and Buddha, there are certainly some commonalities. And there's some commonalities that I particularly have fun with, that they broke free and stood apart from the common discourse of the day, certainly of the law of the day, right? They were rebels in that regard. They were original thinkers. But that idea of original thinking, we're going to come back around to. But they were ignited with that light within them, and then they went out and let it shine. They did not hide it. They allowed it to be seen and to be heard and to be felt. And I think that's something common to mystics, is that sense of light, right? That sense of light. So the similarities between Jesus and Buddha, certainly compassion, the golden rule, right? We hear both in their teaching. That wisdom is from within, that we don't have to just listen to the teacher or the priest or the minister. You know it for yourself. I can help guide you, but it is not my words. It is that feeling and connection within you that makes the difference. They both also spoke about materialism, simplicity, temptation, salvation. So we're just going to touch a little bit on how science of mind squares with some of those ideas. Can you get me my water? I have this book. It's a fabulous book. And here we're talking about these parallels between Jesus and Buddha. Last month, we honored both. We had Christmas, and we had Bodhi Day. Thank you, sweetie. So here at the center, we celebrated both, and of course in April, we celebrate both again. And we couldn't do it in April, but Buddha's birthday is typically celebrated at the beginning of April. We'll celebrate it at the beginning of May with a Buddhist monk and Gopi and Neela. Many of you know them in the room. So we're going to have a big morning, a couple hours of meditation and chant and a lovely time. And again, here we teach science of mind, which I consider, and I get this word from Dr. Michael Beckwith, Bernard Beckwith. Is that we are trans-denominational, that the Centers for Spiritual Living are trans-denominational. It's an idea about the exploration of religion and the practice of spirituality in a way that is personal to each one of us. It is individual, yet what we do, how we grow, how we learn, is always with the precept that what we do affects the whole. That what I do affects you, because I am not separate from you. What I do affects the earth, because I am not separate. I literally have my being and am fed and get my air from the earth. Cannot be separate, right? Cannot be separate. So our tagline for the Centers for Spiritual Living is creating a world that works for everyone and all. So again, trans-denominational. So in this book, the editor, Marcus Borg, he's a Jesus scholar, PhD, professor of religion, and Jack Kornfield has the opening to it, an American-trained Buddhist monk. And in the book, Jack Kornfield says that these are two of the greatest holy men that have ever walked the earth. And I don't think many of us would doubt that. Truly, their works have inspired billions of people while they were living and still today. So would you agree with that? Yes, right? It's said today that there are 2 billion Christians, 535 million Buddhists, roughly 7 to 8% of the people. I would suggest that there's probably more Buddhists than that, because I think a lot of people subscribe to the Buddhist tenets without calling themselves Buddhist. But they speak with one heart, I do believe, Jesus and Buddha, and their teachings. So before Ernest Holmes came a man named Plotinus. Plotinus was an influencer of Ernest Holmes, and he was a 3rd century mystic. And he was a synthesizer like Ernest Holmes, who weaved, through Judaism and Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism, what we call the science of mind, with philosophy and science and psychology, right? And there we get this teaching. Well, Plotinus taught that there is one. There's a unity in the universe. That there is an intelligence inherent in all of creation in the universe. So he talked of what's the nature of God, and he said there's two aspects, the divine and the personal. That within each one of us, there is that where we touch upon the divine, where we have that connection, where we feel that connection, where we can commune, like I talked about last week, right? Yeah, we can be in that space of communion. But oftentimes, he said, we're pulled in a different way. And of course, Buddha and Jesus talked a lot about that pull, and where we find ourselves when we forget, when we have forgotten the path that we're on. Plotinus said that God's distance from us is 0. God's distance from us is 0. But our distance from God is as far as our scattered attention will lead us. Yeah, right? It's a degree of separation, and it's really degrees of our own conscious awareness of the divinity inherent within ourselves and all of life. So Jesus and Buddha invited their followers and continue to invite their followers into a life of spirituality, into having a personal experience which beautifully aligns with the teaching of science of mind. Buddha said, one truth, many paths. He also said, see and know for yourself. Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven or the kingdom of God is within you. And their teachings gave us a way to practice, to live in the world with an open heart. Ernest Holmes said at the end of his life that if he had it to do over again, he would have started with the heart. He started with the mind, as many of you who have practiced this teaching know. Mental control of conditions, which is very much a Buddhist thing. So both Jesus and Buddha have ethical teachings, life-transforming experiences. And they incited a renewal in their religions of their childhood, right? Of their upbringing. I actually read, and I want to do more research on this, and maybe somebody in the room actually knows about it, but both of them were instrumental in ending animal sacrifice in their religions. Yeah, and as a vegetarian of almost 33 years, that struck a chord with me. Yeah. And they both talked of wisdom, and their wisdom teachings were radical, almost subversive. It could be maybe said that Jesus might have had a longer life had he not pushed those social justice issues. But he felt them because he lived them, right? He was not born wealthy, as Buddha was. But they both spoke of a way, a path, a way of transformation. And it was never exclusive to them. They never said, I am the anointed one, only me can do this. They said, you too can do this. You too can know. You too can act upon that knowing. You too can listen and hear. So this philosophy of science of mind is about liberation. Ernest Holmes said that we can be liberated from all discord, that it is possible for every one of us to be in that place of freedom from discord. And it's certain to be eventually achieved by all. But what Ernest Holmes said and what Jesus said and what Buddha said was, it's your responsibility. Nobody's going to do it for you. And I talked about that all month long. That big R word, it's tough for some of us sometimes. Discipline, responsibility, but to show up, to do our work, to actually follow the path. To know, we have to listen, which means we have to be silent. We have to sit. I suggest a daily practice of sitting in silence. So Jesus talked about the way. Actually, in the book of Acts, there's several passages that talk about his movement as the way. And those that have studied Joel Goldsmith, know his as the infinite way. And of course, Buddha's was the Four Noble Truths, and the fourth of which is the Eightfold Path. Many similarities, but boy, it gets even better than that. Let's just listen to a couple. On compassion, Jesus said, "Do unto others as you would have them do to you." Buddha, consider others as yourself. Jesus, if anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. Buddha, if anyone should give you a blow with his hand, with a stick or a knife, you should abandon any desires and utter no evil words. Amazingly similar. Jesus, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. Are you there? I'll continue. From anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who begs from you, and if anyone takes away your goods, do not ask for them again. That's in Luke. Buddha, hatreds do not ever cease in the world by hating, but by love. This is an eternal truth. Overcome anger by love. Overcome evil by good. Overcome the miser by giving. Overcome the liar by truth. Not going to ask for a show of hands. Jesus, these are amazingly similar. From Matthew 26, put your sword back into its place, for all those who take the sword will perish by the sword. Buddha, abandoning the taking of life, the ascetic Gautama dwells refraining from taking life without stick or sword. Wow, they didn't know each other. They didn't do this together. Okay, one more. Jesus, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Buddha, just as a mother would protect her only child at the risk of her own life, even so, cultivate a boundless heart towards all beings. Let your thoughts of boundless love pervade the whole world. Love and compassion. For both of them, they were inviting us into a new way of seeing and a new way thereby of being. I was once blind and now I can see. Can you relate? I think all of us can, right? We've had a journey, we've been on a journey, and it always wasn't filled with delight. But when we look for the light, we are able to transform that situation. Both of these teachings, all three of these teachings, offer a psychological, a spiritual process of transformation. Again, freedom from bondage of every kind. Buddha said life is about letting go, right? It's about letting go, not grasping, finding liberation through that release, through allowing, gentle. Jesus encouraged us that those who empty themselves will be exalted. Encouraged us to lose our lives, right? That to lose your life, you find it. Very similar ideas, inviting us to lose the structure, to lose the confines that we find ourselves resisting against, fighting against, to have an open heart and mind, to be in that place of openness. They both taught their disciples. Jesus would say to take up a cross, right? That one should take up their cross, dying to an old way of being, resurrecting into a new way. I say peel the onion, right? And there's lots and lots and lots of layers to it. I believe that that is our evolution, our own personal evolution and humanity's evolution. And Ernest Holmes talked about evolution as it fits with involution. Involution, going within and finding spirit. In that communing is where we evolve. Going within is how we rise. Yes? Yeah. The first Christian writer, Paul, said that no longer it is I who lives, but Christ who lives in me. Isn't it just the same? It's a different way to say the same thing, isn't it? It's amazing that we fight. It is absolutely amazing that we choose to see differences rather than the similarities. It is amazing. It's simply amazing. So compassion and love. Compassion and love for each other. We have an opportunity during these 64 days that begin, I think, on Friday, to do some practices, and you'll be hearing a lot more from me about that. At the end of the March, we're going to have a weekend seminar to bring more peace into our own lives and thereby be able to share that peace, be that peace in the world. So here's an important consideration before I end. How did these two men, separated by 500 years and 3,000 miles, talk so similarly? Different cultures, different religions. How did that happen? There's a lot of speculation that Jesus traveled to India, Jesus traveled to Egypt. Most of that has been debunked by the historians. They went within, didn't they? They both sat in silence a lot. That's where the wisdom came from. That's where the wisdom of the mystic comes from. That's where your wisdom comes from. That's where my wisdom comes from. William James, the father of psychology, who wrote The Varieties of Religious Experience, said that it is this kind of knowing that is definitive, undeniable. It's that I know that I know that I know, right? He said, it's a knowing of the way things are. Sensing, seeing, beyond form, beyond conditions. Metaphysics. Metaphysical. So here, now, in his book, Borg says, from there flowed their wisdom. And I believe that that is so. I believe that that is so. And that we can all move away from dysfunction, fear, worry, hatred, separation, selfishness, greed, to a place of love, peace, connection, joy, an unlimited feeling of being one with all life when we come from the inside out. And so that's what I know and affirm for each and every one of us. And so it is. Namaste.